Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if we're more likely to lie for ourselves or for our team? Well, this new study dives deep into that very question. Have you ever thought about whether lying feels just as bad no matter who it helps or hurts? Philosophers usually say yes, that lying is just wrong. But what if our social groups, like our political parties, change how we see honesty? This research explores exactly that, looking at whether people lie differently when it benefits their own group versus an outsider group. They found some really interesting things about coalitional dishonesty that might surprise you. So the big question here is whether the moral cost of lying is fixed like a rule, or if it can change depending on who is involved and what the situation is. Classic philosophy like Kant's ideas suggests lying is always wrong. Utilitarianism says we should aim for the best outcome for the most people impartially. And virtue ethics focuses on being a good person, which includes being truthful. All these ideas in different ways suggest that lying for $100 should feel equally wrong, whether it helps you or someone else. But this paper challenges that. It explores if social identity, being part of a group, actually makes us more or less likely to lie, and if it changes our moral compass. To figure this out, the researchers conducted 3 experiments with a lot of people, over 5,000 American voters from both the Democrat and Republican parties. They used a clever setup where participants had a chance to lie anonymously to potentially double their own or another participant's earnings. The twist was they varied who that other participant was. Sometimes it was someone from their own political party, their in group, and sometimes it was someone from the opposing party, their out group. They wanted to see if participants would lie more to benefit their own team or to get ahead themselves at the expense of someone else. They also looked at beliefs about how much others lie. In the first experiment, the researchers focused on selfish dishonesty. This is when someone lies to benefit themselves. They wanted to know if people would lie more to hurt an out-group member or an in-group member if it meant they got a bigger personal gain. So, in this experiment, participants were paired with another voter. Then, they played a game where they had to guess if a die roll would be odd or even. If they guessed correctly, they got a bonus. If they guessed incorrectly, their paired participant would have gotten the bonus. But since they guessed wrong, they didn't. The critical part is how they reported their guess. If they guessed wrong, they could lie and say they guessed right to get the bonus for themselves. The researchers systematically varied whether the paired participant was an in-group member, same party, or an out-group member, different party. What they found was pretty surprising. People lied about the same amount. Actually, whether it was to benefit themselves at the cost of an in-group member or an out-group member. The percentages were very close, and a statistical test, sort of like a fluke-o-meter, showed there was no significant difference. So, for selfish lies, people didn't show a bias based on group identity. However, there was a twist in their beliefs. Even though their behavior was the same, people thought out. Group members lied more than in-group members. They overestimated out. Group dishonesty by quite a bit, about 10 percentage points compared to in-group dishonesty. This tells us that while people might not lie differently for themselves, they definitely have biased ideas about others. Next, they moved on to coalitional dishonesty. This is a super interesting concept. It is when people lie not for their own personal gain, but to benefit someone else in their group. Think of it as loyalty lying. The big question here is whether people are more willing to lie to help a fellow group member than to help an outsider, even if they get nothing out of it themselves. In this experiment, participants played the same die roll game, but this time their personal outcome wasn't directly tied to whether they lied or told the truth. Instead, the bonus money went to another participant. They had 3 conditions. One where a correct guess, which might involve lying, benefited an in-group member. Another where it benefited an out-group member. And the third where a correct guess benefited an in-group member, but an incorrect guess benefited an out-group member. The key was that the participant playing the game didn't get any money themselves, no matter what. It was all about helping or potentially harming someone else. And this is where things got really interesting. Participants lied significantly more, about 9 percentage points more to benefit in-group members compared to out. Group members, they were essentially willing to bend the truth to help someone on their team. Even if they got nothing personally, they didn't seem to lie to actively harm out. Group members, though. The researchers interpret this by saying that in-group love seems to be a bigger driver than out-group hate. It's about caring for your own team. They also found, similar to the first experiment, that people tended to overestimate how much out-group members would lie compared to in-group members. So, even when behavior is similar, beliefs about others can be very different. The third experiment was designed to confirm and bring together the findings from the first 2. They wanted to see if these patterns held up in a more complex design that directly compared selfish versus coalitional dishonesty in the same study. This experiment used a 2x2 design. Participants were randomly assigned to either the selfish dishonesty condition, like in experiment 1, where they could lie to benefit themselves, or the coalitional dishonesty condition, like in experiment 2, where they could lie to benefit someone else. Within each of those, they were also assigned to a scenario where the beneficiary or the victim was either an in-group member or an out-group member. So, 4 conditions in total. The game was the same die, roll task. The results were clear and replicated the previous findings. In the selfish dishonesty conditions, just like in experiment 1, there was no significant difference in how much people lied, whether it was at the cost of an in-group or an out-group member. The proportions were very similar, but in the coalitional dishonesty conditions, the pattern from experiment 2 was strongly replicated. People lied significantly more, by about 10.5 percentage points, to benefit an in-group member than an out-group member. This figure clearly shows this contrast. On the left, for selfish dishonesty, the bars are almost the same height. On the right, for coalitional dishonesty, the bar for the in-group beneficiary is much higher than for the out-group beneficiary. This strongly supports the idea that social identity plays a role in dishonesty, but only when it is about helping others in your group, not when it is about personal gain. And again, the belief part was consistent. Participants overestimated how much out-group members would lie more than in-group members. The gap between what people believed and what actually happened was larger for the out-group. This suggests that even when actual behavior might be similar, we tend to have more negative stereotypes about the honesty of people outside our group. So, what is the big takeaway from all this research? Across 3 large studies, a consistent pattern emerged. There is no evidence of intergroup bias in selfish dishonesty people. Didn't lie more for personal gain at the expense of an out-group versus an in-group. But, and this is the novel part, they found robust evidence for coalitional dishonesty. This is when people lie to help a member of their own group, even when they get no personal benefit and the lying is anonymous. It seems the moral cost of lying is lower if it helps someone on your team. This suggests that being a good group member might involve showing loyalty and generosity to the group, prioritizing your social identity over the rule of telling the truth. Interestingly, they didn't find evidence that people lie to intentionally harm out groups. This points more towards in-group love driving the bias rather than out-group hate. This belief-behavior gap is really important. Even when people acted similarly across groups, they greatly overestimated how much more out-group members would lie. This means our negative beliefs and stereotypes about other groups can create distrust and make cooperation harder, even if those beliefs aren't reflected in actual behavior. This can fuel polarization and make it harder for society to work together. So, what does this mean for us in the real world? For leaders, it means that in workplaces or organizations, employees might lie to help a colleague who is on their team, even if there is no personal gain. This is especially true in groups with strong identities where loyalty might be highly valued. Ethical training could acknowledge this by emphasizing that truth-telling can also be a shared group value within an organization. Now, no study is perfect, and it is important to acknowledge the limitations here. The research focused on American political identities, so we don't know if these findings would hold true for other groups or in different countries. Also, the experiments looked at whether people lied or not, but not how much they lied. Future research could explore if people lie more intensely for their group. And finally, these were controlled lab experiments. It would be fascinating to see if these patterns of coalitional dishonesty show up in real-world situations like the workplace, insurance claims, or even legal settings. To wrap up, this research offers a nuanced view of how group identity affects our honesty. It suggests that when it comes to lying for ourselves, our political team might not make a difference. But when it comes to lying to help someone on our team, our loyalty can indeed bend our moral compass. This coalitional dishonesty seems to be driven more by positive feelings for our group than by negative feelings towards others. And importantly, our biased beliefs about out-group dishonesty can create more problems than actual behavioral differences. It really highlights how powerful our social connections are in shaping our moral decisions. What do you think about these findings? Does this resonate with your own experiences? Let us know in the comments below, and if you found this interesting, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science breakdowns, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.